Hey everybody, how's it going? Ben Gothard here with another Project Egg interview. And today we have a very special guest, Carlos Angel from Colombia. How you doing today, man?
Hey Ben, how's it going?
Good, good. So let's jump right in and get started. My first question for you today, Carlos, is what is your story?
What's my story? Um, I still think I'm kind of in the middle of it, but I guess I have um spent most of my adult life working in the business world and have lately gravitated towards digital marketing and how that impacts, entrepreneurship and also enterprise level projects. So that's kind of where I'm at. Um, I've been helping companies all around the world, so I've traveled a lot during the last decade. But now I'm based in Colombia, Medellin specifically, and I do mostly digital work, either my own projects or helping other people with their projects. So I'm based here, but I get to help people from a lot of places, so it's pretty cool.
Absolutely. So, maybe you could start from the beginning of where you grew up and kind of what sort of childhood you had maybe start from there.
Okay, you want all the way back. Yeah, my childhood was here in Medellin. It was a very, with my family. I mean, we were three children. I was the eldest, so I had two younger sisters, and so there was always people around. My parents, they worked together. They were entrepreneurs, and they had their own business together. So they spent most of their time together, um, but working. So I spent most of my time with my sisters, basically. And so it was a normal childhood. The only thing abnormal, I would say, is the fact that it happened during the heyday of Medellin's, war against drug cartels, which was the 80s and early 90s. Uh, so it was kind of a crazy era that just kind of happened serendipitously. Let's say that's a hard word. Uh, in Medellin, but it happened. So uh, we did have to deal with some of that stuff during our teenage years, which might have been abnormal, but other than that, pretty normal. Um, and when I was 18, I kind of started traveling until I was 30, and I came back to Medellin when I was 30, 31. So I spent all that time either starting in Australia, I did my undergrad in Australia, or working in the U.S., Europe, traveling, etc.
So, I want to dig a little bit more into your past. Um, you said that you were the oldest of three, and that your parents were both entrepreneurs. Can you talk about how that circumstance has come back? Like what did you learn from growing up in that sort of environment? What did you take away from that is now coming back to reflect what you're doing now as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think, from all the way back, my family has been entrepreneurs, so 5 generations at least. And in where I grew up in Colombia, it's a very entrepreneurial city because it's in the middle of the mountains, in the middle of the Andes. So 200 years ago, you had to be an entrepreneur to kind of make it all the way here from Spain or wherever and make your life, with your own bare hands. And so people are very, gritty. And my family specifically has been doing their own stuff for 5 generations, 150 years at least. So my father was an incarnation of that. But my grandfather, I also got to see before he died at least 15 years of his own entrepreneurship journey, and he was 75, and it was normal. So I grew up in a household where entrepreneurship is the normal, and you're kind of weird if you choose to go a more traditional office route. While in other households, it's weird to go into entrepreneurship. So that's what I would take out of it.
Absolutely. And so, for people who did not grow up in that environment, like you said, it might be weird, if you will, or abnormal to jump into entrepreneurship, to take that leap and to really go out on your own. But what advice could you give to budding entrepreneurs, if you will, who may be struggling to take that leap?
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of time, right? You just have to take that leap. It's my advice would be it's riskier not to. At the end of the day, if you don't, and if you try and live your life in the 21st century as people did in the 20th century, which is, get a job and hunker down for 30 years and everything will work out, you're screwed. So that's more risky. Don't do that. So just take your time. If you need to get a job and save up and learn, that's fine. But just know that at some point you're going to have to start constructing outside, the safety of a group. And it can be big, small, huge, whatever undertaking you do, but ultimately you will have to undertake something in your life.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I really like what you said about constructing, because I think one of the attributes, if you will, of a lot of entrepreneurs, at least a lot of the ones that I've spoken to, has been that tendency to be a creator, to be a builder, to put things together in different ways. So I'm really glad that you said that. But I want to dive back a little bit more. You said that at 18 you started traveling, and you didn't stop traveling until age 30. Can you maybe take us through those years of where you went, what you did, and really what you learned from that, and how that has shaped you as a person?
Yeah, I think, like I said before, I grew up from 0 to 18 in a very, in a household which was strong. I had both my parents, two of my sisters, my grandfathers, cousins, because families here are very, they spend time together. Almost every weekend I spent with 25 members of my extended family in a big house that we have near the city. So I went from that, and at 18, when I started traveling, I got the taste of independence for the first time, and just how big the world is, and how little you know about your true calling or creative expression. So that's what traveling did to me. It just kind of opened my eyes, and I never went back. Like, I could never stop traveling. So I started in Australia just because it was the farthest thing I could think of. And I ended up, doing my undergrad there. So almost 4 years back and forth. And I ended up living most of them in Perth, which is the most isolated city in Australia. It's in Western Australia. And it's almost 32-hour flight from Medellin. So that was a very cool experience, just how it feels to be isolated and the complete opposite of where you grew up, which is like constantly family around in a support network and system. And after that, I lived in another city in Colombia, Bogota, which is the capital, a big metropolis, 15 million city, huge, huge city, very different from Medellin. But that's where I started my professional career. And then I went back to the US. I did actually my master's degree in the University of Chicago, which is a very, traditional Ivy League sort of environment. Typical US city with the sports teams and, college football. So I lived that for 2 years. And I've also done a lot of backpacking, almost a year and a half in Asia, uh, including India, Europe. So it's just been a whole lot of things. I've always rationalized those years, like my 20s, as being able to build by taking a lot of risk, just taking risks literally, and just finding a way to fit travel into that whole ordeal of building your career and, your education. And just, it's very hectic. Your 20s are very hectic because you have to do a lot of things. So that's kind of what I try to do. It was a very hectic for me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, you know, you were saying that at 18 you went to Australia to do your undergrad.
Yeah.
What did you study? And could you maybe give a little bit of insight into um, what you really learned in college? Because some people go to college and they get really into their major, are really into their studies, and then other people go and they find a passion completely different. So can you maybe just talk a little bit about your experiences in that time?
Yeah, I mean, I did. It was a very liberal arts type education with a lot of philosophy, a lot of politics, a lot of international studies, economics, ethnocultural studies, history, Asian studies. So I spent a lot of time in my undergrad just reading about the human condition, past, present, future, but just thinking a long time about that, which I didn't really do up until that point. You don't really think about those sort of things during high school because I was a normal student at high school. I didn't spend any longer reading, a textbook that I had to. I did other things. So during college, it was the first time I really spent a lot of time thinking about something, in this case, humans. And what I got is that I really enjoy spending a long time thinking about stuff. So college was kind of when I felt my intellectual curiosity really spark up. When I first went to Australia and start reading books about, Buddhism and the war in the Middle East and all sorts of different topics from a very different perspective as the one I grew up with.
Absolutely. And so you were saying that you kind of figured out that you really like taking a long time to think about stuff. Um, how has that trait of yourself that you discovered and that desire to learn, how has that carried forward to benefit you and come back to help you out later on in your life, and how has that led to your success?
Yeah, I think that I've learned that you have to maintain, and it's also when you run a company, you have to have different trains of thought, so to speak, and at different speeds. Because if you're only thinking fast, then if you're a fighter pilot, that's great, because you're making second decisions that are your life is at stake. But at the other end, you have to run a company, you have to run your life, you have to be thinking about trends and stuff that might get in your way. So you do have to be more strategic than simply thinking what's going to happen 10 seconds in the next 10 seconds of my life. So that's where the balance comes in, and I think that you have to find a way to maintain like slow systems of thinking and fast systems of thinking, and just use those to make decisions. So college was about finding my slow system, really digging down into my emotions and my reasoning, and really bubbling a decision to the top after a lot of introspection.
Wow.
And then my professional life has been more about developing those fast decision making systems that you sometimes have to make.
Absolutely. That's really cool. Now, can you the process you just described of really a lot of introspection, right? A lot of looking at who you are on the inside, and just wrestling with all that until you can come to that decision. Can you maybe give a little bit of insight on how to get that process down, how to start, right? Because I feel like a lot of people struggle with that, and a lot of people don't know who they are even after college. So maybe you could just talk a little bit about that process.
Yeah. Yeah. One, I would say that it's a constant battle. I mean, I still struggle with it every day. So I would say the first thing you need is just practice. You need to find your daily way of dealing with that, and dig in deeper and really check yourself on a lot of assumptions and decisions you might have made. And one of the things I really learned at my MBA after 2 years and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars spent in tuition is something that economists called sunk costs fallacy. And it's just a mental thing that we sometimes suffer in the present for decisions that we made in the past. And entrepreneurship is a clear, exhibit of that. Sometimes we just stick to things that we shouldn't, or make other types of very biased decisions. So, sorry, I lost my train of thought there. What was the question again, Ben?
So that process of introspection,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So one thing, practice. Just like keep it up and just like really, really um, dig into it. And after that, I do think that you can start to analyze your personality, and that is going to help you, mm, make decisions that align with you, basically. And that's what you're looking for, that alignment between your you and what you're actually doing, and the decisions that you're making and bringing into your life. So how do you analyze your personality? Well, I found a couple of ways that I use and I think that are helpful, both with me and with the team. And one is something called archetypes, which is something that Jung, a psychologist, invented. And it's just a way for you to figure out what is your aspiration as a human being. Like, what is that construction after, seeing movies and seeing your parents and just culture that you feel best encapsulates what a successful human being is. So, you have the athlete, you have the intellectual, you have the adventurer, you have the adrenaline junkie, the thrill seeker, it's called. So there's 18, 21. It doesn't really matter the number. You just have to know what that archetype is for you, or what your main archetypes are. For example, for me, the explorer or the nomad archetype is very strong. So I need to find a way to maintain a lifestyle and make decisions that allow me to work and build on that, not destroy it, which is what a lot of people do. They may have that archetype as developed as me and as constantly unsatisfied, but they make decisions that go against it. So they're going to suffer. So that's one. The archetype model is something that you can figure out. And then something called Myers-Briggs, which is a typification of your personality into 16 types. And it just allows you to understand if you're an extrovert, an introvert, how you obtain information, how you process it, and what you actually do with that information in terms of judge it or perceive it. So stuff like that. You just have to be very constant about knowing yourself so that you can use entrepreneurship to build something that is going to feel good, and it's not going to feel like a weight or so yeah.
Absolutely. That was a great answer, by the way. Thank you for that. So,
Yeah.
you were talking about how you need to know your archetype because you need to know how, as an individual, you get information. You input information to your brain. So, I have a two-part question for you. One is,
Well, that's more the second one, the Myers-Briggs. That's what Myers-Briggs describes. The archetype describes your cultural aspiration. For example, some people might not be at all attracted to this whole concept of exploring and nomadism and just going from one place to the other and seeing the world. Some people are not attracted by it. They need other things. For example, the mother archetype needs that nourishment, needs a family. That's how they express creatively. I don't have that right now. So you just have to know what makes you really, really excited, and go with that.
okay, okay. And I definitely think that it is important to know both, right? Because
Yeah.
because the excitement, if you can harness that and make that either your career or your life's goal, it's working with it. It's not fighting it. Kind of how you were mentioning earlier. So
Exactly.
with the Myers Briggs, with that information intake, if you will, I do have a two-part question for you. The first is, how important is it as an entrepreneur to constantly be learning? And two, what ways have you found are the best ways for you to get that information? You mentioned reading, but maybe there are some other ways you'd like to talk about.
Yeah, sure. I mean, learning and development for an entrepreneur has to be part of the business model. It has to be baked into your lifestyle. So, I mean, for example, I don't do anything really until midday, like noon. And before that, I'm either, doing physical type thing like yoga or just going to the gym or whatever, sunbathing, whatever it is, walking or learning. And it might be, 2 hours one and 2 hours the other. So that's 4 hours. And in most people's lifestyles, that's something that's ludicrous to spend 2 hours, just relaxing your body and 2 hours just reading and learning and just, it's insane for a lot of people. That's really what, as an entrepreneur, you have earned. One, you have earned the privilege, if you do it right, to say, I am blocking like this amount of time and nothing can happen within the boundaries of reality in that block of time. That's a privilege. So use it. And two, use some of that privilege to develop and really learn more things so you can keep it. Because it's by being a privilege, and I've lived it, it sometimes gets taken away. You make bad decisions, you lose the hunger and the edge to really stay on top of your stuff. So I think the moment you lose that, you better have your stuff figured out and stashed away, because if not, you might be into a rude awakening, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And so, in that time that you do spend learning, what ways do you find work best for you? Like, do you like reading? Do you like watching videos? Do you like listening to podcasts? What sort of works best for you?
Yeah, I do a lot. Like, I do most of what you just mentioned. I find that my mind is very theoretical. So if somebody shows me something, I kind of get it and can take it from there in my mind. Like, I can start doing scenarios and just tweaking things in my mind. I don't actually need to do it to see the system, function. Some people need to actually move the things and actually do it. So that's message number one. Because message number two is that you need to find a craft. You need to find a craft, because a craft is something that you're going to constantly and hopefully perpetually develop. And it's like that movie Jiro Dreams of Sushi, where this 80-year-old is just making sushi, and he just loves sushi, and he's the best sushi guy because he's been making it for 50 years. So you need to find that, and you need to practice that every day, and it has to be very specific, because if not, you're not going to be able to know what you need to get better at. So the way I describe it is like, think of a T. You need that bar, horizontal bar, which is your athlete profile. You need to be good at most things. Like when you played sports, you need to be able to run and jump and just do most things well. It's the same with your career as an entrepreneur. You need to be able to understand accounting and marketing and a bunch of things. But then you kind of need to find your depth, like that vertical line. Like, where are you really going to drill down? So for me, it has been digital marketing. And I feel that it goes very well with an entrepreneur, because if you get enough sales and enough profit, then you can pay other people to handle the other things. So that's been my experience.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I wanna touch on the digital marketing a little bit later on in the interview, but for now, I still want to keep going on this timeline of your life. So you went to Australia for undergrad, and then you said you went to Chicago for 2 years for your MBA, I believe it was.
The MBA.
So could you talk a little bit about your experiences in that time, and again, what you learned and what you really took away from that?
Yeah, I mean, what happened before those two events was that I went back to Colombia and I started working, like my first real job, so to speak, was in Juan Valdez. Juan Valdez is one of the most famous brands of Colombia. It's kind of like the Starbucks of Colombia, and it represents the Colombian coffee growers. It's a brand that it's structured in a way where it's owned by thousands of coffee growers. So it's not like it's a co-op, so to speak, and they have this big marketing or this big brand, but then they needed to build a big marketing department to kind of monetize it. So that's where I came in. I was like 23, 24, and I was, hired to figure out the digital strategy in the US. And this was like back in 2006 where, things were not that clear. So it was very interesting. And I did that for 2 years, and it was it was amazing because I got to go to all these coffee farms here in Colombia and just learn about that very incredible business model that they have, and then find a way to scale it and really take it to the US market. So I did that, and after that, I got the entrepreneurship bug for like the real time that you kind of go, I'm going to quit. I need to do something else. I'm just not being myself, whatever. And I quit, and I started my own. It's a fast casual restaurant, really targeting lunch people, like executives, lunch people, busy in a really busy part of Bogota. So I did that for 2 years. So that was my first real entrepreneurship gig. Then I closed that. I made one of bad decisions of my first of quite a few. So I closed the restaurant, and I ended up going to work for the Colombian government for 2 years. And my job was to attract foreign investment into the country, especially in the biotech industry. So I had to network with CEOs and venture capital funds in China, the US, and bring them here and connect them to, high-level public officials, CEOs here, entrepreneurs. So that was very interesting, just trying to connect the dots internationally, and to do it for your country was cool. And that's when I went to Chicago to do my MBA. So I had a couple of years of experience before going the whole MBA thing, because people need to be careful, because going into one of these, top MBAs is an experience, but it's an expensive experience, which you're going to pay for quite a few years. So you need to be very mindful of why you're doing it and when, and it's just a big life decision, just like buying a house or it's a $100,000 decision. So yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, I kind of want to talk a little bit about those years between your undergrad and MBA. So you said you went in your first real job, if you will, was working with the Starbucks of Colombia. So
Yeah.
what did you learn as far as business expertise or business techniques or strategy? What did you learn from there, and how, and what have you taken with you yourself from that experience?
Yeah, I think that most of my work experience have been of my work experiences up until Uber, and aside from the ones where I am the founder of my own project, have been pretty traumatic. I mean, they have been traumatic for a variety of reasons. It may be your boss, how mundane your tasks were, a variety of reasons. But I think that job, it was very interesting because I was young, and I had studied philosophy and reading up for 3 months on Genghis Khan, and then people were asking me to do digital business, blah blah blah. So that was a huge change, but it was very cool because I got to actually jump right into a very practical side of the work world, so to speak. But I kind of fell into it, to be honest. But so I take that it kind of put me into the path of sales and digital marketing. But I also got the feeling that things need to be better. Like stuff needs to be better organized. Managers need to be better. The way that strategy gets done is just not right. I mean, they use these traditional balanced scorecard methods that are overcomplicated, and they just made everybody miserable. So yeah, that was very interesting to me. And when I first got the chance at Uber, for example, as general manager, like of my own region, to really experiment as far as work environment, I really got to see the difference that it makes. And I see that going forward, that's really the way to do it. Because if not, people are just not going to be working up to their true potential. They're either going to go and be entrepreneurs from the time they're like 22, which might not be the best idea, or they're going to suffer through it. So, you know.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then, you said you caught the entrepreneur bug, and I love that term. And I feel like entrepreneurs, when you say that, they know exactly what you're talking about immediately. And
Yeah, you
people
start
who
twitching and you just know that you're bored and that you're going to do
right,
something crazy and you don't know when, but you just got it. And you just know you have it.
yep,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. And so, when you started your restaurant, what did you how'd you do it? What where'd you get the idea from? What did you do to actually start it? And maybe you could take us through that time period of starting and running it.
Yeah, I mean, at that time I was very, I was not technical at all. Like right now, I'm so technical when I look back. I mean, at that time I was completely winging it. I didn't have enough money in the bank when I made the decision to quit my job. That's number one. I just had like, $1,000, like enough for 1 month or whatever. Entrepreneurs need to give themselves sufficient oxygen, to make things happen. So that's mistake number one. And I didn't have enough money really to start it up. I didn't have any seed capital. I didn't really have anything to show investors. So it was impetuous, but it was what it was. So I felt I need to do it, that I need to get it done. My inspiration was something I saw in Australia, which was Boost. And I saw like a newspaper article when I was there that said that the CEO and founder of this thing, which is like a juice bar, was the richest woman in Australia. This is like 1999. And it was the whole juice craze, and people were like drinking juice every day. They still do, but, and I said, okay, I'll do a juice bar. Like I'll do the same freaking thing, but I'll do it in Colombia, in Bogota. So the question was, how am I going to get the thing, going, the money basically? And it was a crazy story because what I ended up doing, like my plan after soul searching and just, weighing my options, I said, the only way is to go to Who Wants to Be a Millionaire and win. Like it's just the only way. So I did, I went and I did the whole process. I just really hacked the whole thing. And that's kind of one of my strengths. Even if I'm not completely versed on a system, I can kind of, after a while, visualize it and start hacking it. So I hacked how to get into Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and I went and I lost. Like I did not get to the level that I needed to get my thing going. So of course people are telling me, okay, quit. You need to get a job. Like this is ridiculous. This is getting ridiculous. Like what? And I said, no, no, no. I know. I got it. Like, I need to do something else. Okay, what are you going to do? And I said, I need to go again. Like, I need to go again on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire and win. So I did. I went and I won finally, and that's how I got it funded. So that's a story that it's very funny, but it's true.
So you went on how to be a millionaire twice, and
Yeah.
the second time you won it. That
Yeah.
is awesome. That is
Yeah, that was
awesome.
pretty insane. It's pretty insane that was the only way to do it. That I felt that was the easiest way. That's how bad your prospects would look when you're a 22-year-old entrepreneur. I mean, in Colombia, which is not Silicon Valley, people are not throwing money at you just because you say that you have a business idea, right? So, sometimes you have to take extreme measures or just at least very Hail Mary measures.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you hacked the system. You got in there twice. That's awesome. Um, then did you go immediately and start the restaurant from then? What happened after that?
Yeah, no, I remember I went there after like a week for the check. They just give you this check, they take tax, like is this whole process. And then I remember just taking that check to like this kitchen distributor guy, a warehouse, and it just kind of start taking my money from there. But yeah, it was a completely fluid process from getting the money and just, start buying things and paying for your rent and just getting the contractor and all these things.
That is awesome. That is awesome. So, as you were running the restaurant, and you said, besides besides a few select things, a lot of the business ventures were pretty traumatic. Maybe you could take us through um, like the life of the restaurant, if you will. You know, what actually happened as you were running it? What'd you learn, and you know, what really happened?
Yeah, I think I learned that most failures are chucked or should be like, in other words, you should take responsibility for your failures because most failures are just a consequence of bad planning. And I did not plan that restaurant well. Like I did not spend enough time, really planning and really understanding where everything was coming from, where the money was going in, where it was coming out, where the customers were getting in, where they're coming out. Like really, really seeing that, I did not. And so, of course, you start dealing with the day to day. And when you're an entrepreneur, and especially when you're in the restaurant business, you're literally, the cashier, the accountant, you're doing all these things. And nobody's really thinking about, how to get more customers, how to bring your costs down, like all these strategic things that if they do not get taken care of, you're going to go bankrupt or you're going to be pushed into a position where you're going to feel caged. And that's what ultimately happened. We needed to either take another investor, which I didn't really want to do, like bring in a complete stranger. This was my way of liberating myself, not just, becoming the employee of somebody else. So that was not an option for me. And so we did a couple things until we ran out of money and we had to just basically close the doors, and that was it.
Absolutely. And so from there, you said, I believe you said that you went to work with the government for a little while.
Yeah.
And you were trying to attract investors to come into the country.
Yeah.
So could you maybe talk about your experiences in that time?
Yeah, sure. It was a department that was part of the Ministry of Commerce here in Colombia, Commerce and Trade. And during that time, we had a president from my city, from Medellin, and one of his platforms was foreign investment. He really felt that one of the ways to turbocharge your economy was to attract foreign investment, especially if you get to kind of match it to your strategic interest as a country. So that was kind of what my department tried to do, like look at the strategic interests of the country and see how to push them forward with foreign investment. So specifically, my purview was biotech. And that was very interesting because I got to, get a crash course into the future of like health and food and all these things that at a country level you kind of have to think about. But when you're an individual, it's just not going to be part of your day to day, information diet, so to speak. So that was really cool.
That's awesome. And so you mentioned that you had to network with, some pretty prestigious people, if you will, some high net worth individuals. What did you learn as far as how to approach people, and how did you develop your networking skills?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. I think that one, like everything, practice. Like you just have to put yourself in a position where your networking skills are part of your job, because then you have to develop them or you're gonna suck at your job. So this was a good example of that. Like I literally have to cold call or cold email or whatever to get into these people's radar and get a meeting. In many cases, bring them to Colombia, like get them on a plane. We brought the CEO of Intel. We brought the CEO of like the largest Chinese bank. I mean, we brought in like some really big people, and many of them started with a cold call to someone's secretary. So I think it's just a matter of really understanding what you're trying to accomplish and always seeking win-win interactions. So even if it's the secretary, when you actually get to the guy, like always think win-win. they always need something. They're always interested in something. It could be that they wanted to travel to Colombia because it was warm and tropical and exotic. It could be because they're philanthropic, so the notion of investing in, a whole country interests them. You have to know what motivates them to get them to actually help you. And I think a lot of people just do not do that. They do not spend sufficient time like prospecting and really understanding their customer. And when you're in sales or in networking, you really need to do that. Like you really need to know what to say, what's good, what's bad, etc., etc. So background information is critical for good networking.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I agree 100%. The more time that you take to really put yourself in the other individual's shoes and to say, how can I provide value to you? How can I make this worth your time? I really think that was profound what you said. So, talking to all these people, all these big high up people, you probably met some really interesting folks.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you're I don't know if you're able to talk about it, but if you are, maybe you could talk a little bit about some of the people that you met and some of the relationships that you built through that.
Yeah, I'm not by name, but just a description because he was a character. But one of the people that we brought was like the heir of the largest tourism conglomerate in Spain. And just to give you a dimension of how big this is, tourism in Spain is the largest industry. So you got the biggest company in the biggest industry in a top, 5 country in Europe. So it's a huge, air conglomerate, like one of these big families, and I get to bring like the eldest son, and so he comes and he's like this prima donna, like rock star, billionaire. He has 5 friends, a whole entourage. Uh, so that was very funny because he had his suits and he was just very ostentatious and just very accustomed to showing his wealth. And I think that by the end of his trip, and after taking him to all kinds of places and seeing, a bunch of people and how they deal with everyday life, after he left, I think he changed. Like when I took him to the airport, we ended up being friends, but he really started dressing differently from the day one, speaking differently. So I think that people sometimes change that just from the experience of coming to a country in a position of investment. When you're going to buy into an asset, you really are open to persuasion and to people telling you how it is and what the advantages are and dealing with your preconceptions. So I think that's what we found.
Absolutely, absolutely, that's incredible. So, after you worked with the government for a little while, was that when you went to go pursue your MBA after that?
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe you could take us through that experience of going from being in the field back into the academic arena, if you will.
Yeah, no, that was amazing in a lot of ways. I mean, I don't regret it, but it was a huge decision, and I made it. I mean, that was a huge risk when I made it because again, I didn't have the money. I had $0 in the bank when I made it, and it's only tuition is 100K, $100,000, and then you have your living expenses and everything else for 2 years of your life. On top of that, you're not working for 2 years. So that was the position that I was in. But what I felt was that I needed to experience it. Like I was never going to feel content if I did not know what people at these institutions really learned, like at these top MBAs in the world. Like how are they teaching them to print money? Like what is this thing? 100K just for tuition. So that was kind of what I felt, just a very deep curiosity from learning how to make money and how to manage business by the best in the world. So I made the decision and the sacrifice. And I got very good things out of it. Like my career definitely and everything that happened afterwards can be traced to that decision. but it was a huge decision. So I don't recommend it for everybody.
Absolutely, absolutely. So then, when you graduated and got your MBA, what did you do after that?
So I did my internship during the summer of your between your first and second year at investment bank in New York, which was, this just this weird places where people never really leave. Like most of them are millionaires, but they don't really leave the office. So it gets very weird very fast. And I spent almost 4 months in this setting. And the story I always tell is that I went there with this other friend from Chicago, from Booth, and we shared an apartment in downtown New York. And during 3 months or a bit more, we only ran into each other twice because we were always going into our house at different times and spending a couple hours sleeping and then heading off again while the other guy was still sleeping. And we just always crossed each other. So I lived that, and I said, like, I do not want this. So I went back my second year and said, I'm going to try consulting, which is like the second big career choice that you have after an MBA. You either do, I mean, you really have four, which is consulting, investment banking, entrepreneurship, or corporate, especially strategy, marketing, etc. So I tried consulting, and I focused my second year on getting hired by one of these consulting firms, management consulting firms, and that's what I did. So after my MBA, I knew it was going to suck. Again, like all these experiences have been very traumatic. You learn a lot, but you really feel that it's not where you want to be. You're just kind of dealing with your past decision. So I knew it was going to suck. So I went with some friends and I just took my signing bonus again, like this huge chunk of money that they give you just because you signed your life away for 2 years, and went to Eastern Europe for like 4 months during the summer after my MBA, after the MBA. So that was incredible. We just had an amazing time. And then I went back to this very, mundane, gritty work life where you're really getting up early and going to bed late and just always cranking for somebody else's, agenda, basically. So I did that, but you learn a lot in those consulting jobs because you're dealing with $1 million projects, helping, Fortune 500 companies deal with issues that are too complex for them to deal with. So it's very challenging, and you do learn a lot about communication and work ethic and just solution thinking. So yeah, so that was my first job out of my MBA.
That's awesome. So you were doing the management consulting for a little while,
Yeah.
and you said that you said you signed your life away for 2 years. Um,
That's the normal. You sign like a 2 year contract and they give you a signing bonus. So it's very preconceived. Like these things are already established how they work if you go into an MBA. So it's normal for them to give you a signing bonus as a way to get your loyalty. And it's the same way in Silicon Valley. Like when you sign into a company like Uber as an executive, they're going to give you options, but they're going to be tied to a certain time frame or what they call vesting schedule. So I think they always kind of try and get you to stick around somehow economically.
Absolutely, absolutely. So after that engagement, for those 2 years, what did you do after that?
Yeah, so after consulting, I quit again. Like I got the entrepreneurship bug again, so I quit everything. Um, and that's when I really started getting into tech because most of my consulting work, I did it for very big companies in the financial industry and specifically in the technology and marketing space, like digital marketing, just figuring out, or digital transformation, they call it, but just dealing with the internet when you're these huge companies. So that's when I really started getting into, how do you figure out the internet to create or scale or do whatever with a company or your business. And I got into tech and I started my first like real startup after that, which was in the proximity marketing space. So what it did is that I actually went around retail businesses such as we got Armani and we got other Zara and other, no, not Zara, Armani, another Italian, but these high-end brands, and we installed beacons, which are basically these things that you put on the wall, and they give out a Bluetooth signal, just kind of like this always-on Bluetooth signal. And then we had an app that detected these things that we had put around malls all over the city, and companies could actually serve ads or coupons real time. So it was kind of a proximity ad network where brands and customers could connect based on not only where they were, which is geo-targeting, but close to what, which is proximity. So I did that, which was very interesting because now you're dealing with things such as, you know, a product and a user and technology and just all these things. But I learned a lot as well. So that was that company. And after that, when I was kind of pivoting in that moment, because what I had found is that it's very difficult. I mean, in other words, I'll rephrase it. One of the first questions you have to ask yourself as an entrepreneur, especially if you're into startups and like fast growth business models, you have to ask yourself if you're into sales or marketing in the beginning. You can only do one, and you cannot get this question wrong. If you have a marketing structured business, you need to be doing marketing. If it's based on sales, you need to be doing sales. And sometimes the economics don't work of these things. So when you have a business like the one I have, it's very salesy because most of these accounts, they need recurring visits and they need to be nurtured through a sales and a CRM funnel or whatever. But the prices that you're charging and just the economics of the network are not there. So you can't acquire them through marketing because it's not cost effective. You have to go to these people. But just the fact that they're small business owners and local business owners makes it very difficult to scale profitably. So companies like Belly that are into like the local rewards, etc., are super difficult to scale. And if you look at the biggest companies in tech, none of them are into like rewards or loyalty or any of that because it's super difficult to acquire these companies. It's like Groupon. Groupon experienced the same thing. So I experienced the Groupon effect. That's what I will call it. Like you have these sales guys, and what they bring in is just not enough for you to really say like it makes sense to continue down this road. So I was pivoting into the tourism industry. I was going to actually build travel advice network because I was really into travel. So I said like, you know, why don't we follow this passion like what you said? We just, you know, use it as a force and not kind of fight it. So I was building this thing. I call it, I used to call it, I remember like TripAdvisor on truth serum. Because you go into TripAdvisor and most of these things are it's just bad advice. None of these people are real travelers so how can you get like real-time useful advice when you're going to spend thousands of dollars traveling? So I was making that decision, and that's when Uber came into my life. And I ended up going with Uber because I felt it was something I was never going to really have again, and I probably never will, which is a chance to be an entrepreneur, like literally, but have an unlimited budget. Like when else is that going to happen? When are you going to be in that position? Never. So that was my rationale, and that's why I ended up taking on the challenge of launching Uber here from scratch and building it. And that was, you know, a crazy experience. So yeah.
So, you know, that your story so far has been absolutely incredible. And again, you know,
I told you it was hectic.
Yeah, it's hectic, but it's awesome, man. It really is. So that time when Uber approached you, can you maybe give a little bit of insight on that process of how they approached you, what that back and forth kind of was, and then maybe take us through your timeline at Uber and talk about the incredible success that you really did have.
Yeah, I mean, I got a call one day from someone I had finished a consulting project with. She worked in another consulting company, but we kind of did a joint venture with them on a big project. So we met there, and you know, she kind of liked my work, and we became friends. And I just got a call out of nowhere, and she just told me, like, we're advising these guys. Like, she didn't really say the name. We're just advising them. They want to go into Colombia. They don't know who to speak to, but they came to us, so we're just kind of giving them the lay of the land and just helping them. But they're looking for a general manager, and I gave them your name. Do you want them to give you a call? So I told her, like, who is this company? Because she said she's very mysterious, and like who is this company? She's like, Uber. So I'm like, wow. It's one of those moments in your life that are going to change your life. You kind of know something is going to happen. So I was like, okay, tell them to give me a call, because I wasn't really looking for a job. I was really concentrating on pivoting and really figuring out this startup thing, so I could not have to get a job again, right? So I was really concentrating on that, as we all are as entrepreneurs. But then these things kind of get thrown into your life, and you do have to be able to adapt and reconsider. And that's kind of what happened to me. I reconsidered, and I said, okay, this is an incredible opportunity. I do get to be an entrepreneur because I built it from scratch. I was employee number 1,000 worldwide and number one here. So, you have huge amounts of freedom and leverage and just blue ocean in front of you. And my experience there was amazing, dramatic, and I learned I learned a lot after those 2 years. But I would just summarize it as, hustle. You just have to be very, very determined to get things done, and you have to be very aggressive in your goal setting and really believe in your ability to get to those goals. Because that's what we really experience that most people will not get to experience. How do you start with something that is zero, right? And then, start doing this and that and just really grinding through it. And then start seeing $1 billion business emerge out of nowhere, and just thousands and thousands of people join the company out of nowhere. Like, to experience that sort of growth was just eye-opening in a whole bunch of ways.
So, from the time that you started until the time that that experience was over, how big did you build it? Because I've done some research and tried to look it up, but I want to hear it from you, from the actual person that was going through it. How big did it get in Colombia by the time you were finished?
I mean, we were approaching $1 billion business, a run rate of $1 billion. So it was amazing. Yeah, in 3 years.
Wow.
And with a growth rate, of double digits a month. So it was still growing. It hadn't stopped at all. Because the thing is that these business models, the sharing economy business models, or not so much the sharing economy, the gig economy, which is fast jobs, is going to be huge in places like Latin America, Colombia including, because people need jobs, and they're just places that are ready to accept platforms that are going to offer thousands and thousands of jobs at the push of a button, which is what Uber does here. So I think it's very interesting how these things and these platforms are going to empower the middle class in places such as Colombia to really make a living, a flexible living, and focus on doing other things in their spare time. It's just a flexible income source.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, in 3 years, you built $1 billion business. That is incredible, my friend. So,
Yeah.
could you maybe talk about how you did it? Because it's one thing to say, yeah, you got to hustle and you got to bust your ass and you got to do, you got to always believe in yourself. But it's another thing to actually talk about how you built $1 billion business.
Yeah. Like I said, goal setting, like you need to know where you are. So imagine the hockey curve, right? And you need to know where you are, because your thinking and your habits and your projects are going to be different depending where you are. So if I give you advice and you're $100 million company, well, it might be bad advice if you're $1,000 company. So know where you are and know where the next milestone is, and just really think hard about how to shorten the distance between where you are and the next milestone. So the way I did it was just, 10 to the 1, 10 to the 2, 10 to the 3. So just an exponential curve of $10. And you just focus on the next one. So, how are you going to make your first $10 per day, like a run rate of $10? Okay, we'll figure it out. Sell your mom. Done. Okay, $100. Okay, make a couple of calls. Maybe bring your cousins in. Done. 1,000. And just go fast until it gets hard. And then you're going to have to start bringing people in, and you have to go to 100,000. But after a point, it just gets easier, and you just start going like 1,000,000, 10,000,000, 100,000,000. And you just start doing it. So just focus on the next thing in front of you and what that 10 to the whatever X is for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So once you finished building that for those 3 years, once you finished building that up, what did you do? Where'd you go? And chronologically, when was that? When did you step away from that engagement?
I stepped away, a month and a half ago. So this was very recent. And I've been doing either speaking engagements like traffic and conversion, or just, I've been doing some traveling, and, relaxing, like what I say, just recharging and really having a long time. Because the other thing, the myth that entrepreneurs have is that if they're not busy, they're not being successful, which is, it's a huge myth because it's the other way around. Sometimes if you can, and if you're willing to give yourself the option, it's wonderful to just stop and literally have very little stuff to do. So you just have to deal with everyday life and boredom, and what you really want to do next eventually will, bubble up again from your insides. So that's kind of where I'm at. I really feel that I don't feel that I need to do the whole startup thing again, even if it's like to make my own $1 billion. I feel that I've seen what that entails, what it is. Like, I've seen what it is, and it's got good things and bad things, but I don't really want to go through it again, to be honest. So I'm really thinking about going like into the self-publishing space and just really hunker down to write a good book this year and promote it and take my time to publish it, promote it, and just really, consolidate my thoughts around the book, which I think it's what a book does. It forces you to sacrifice your thoughts, consolidate them, and put them out in a product or a package. I want to start a blog. I want to start a podcast. So really more about publishing my thoughts than, building a business and this whole thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, do you already have a book in mind that you wanted to write, or is it's kind of just at the stage of, I know I want to write a book, I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to put in it?
Yeah, I have ideas, that I have more than ideas. I have titles, and I just need to decide. So I have a couple of options. I think they all revolve around the concept of how to use work, to improve our lives. So even if you're in the inside, how to make work happier, more fun. And if you're on the outside, as a brand, we have all this money and all these resources that are basically spent to make users happy and improve their lives. So how do you really become productive and fix what needs to be fixing from a marketing standpoint? Like kind of what we did at Uber. We fixed transportation. Yeah, it makes a lot of money, but it was also what we needed to do as marketing. We needed to make it faster and better and seamless. So I'm very interested in writing stuff in that kind of niche. So one of the things that I'm really thinking about is this concept of like extreme productivity. Like, how productive can you really get? And at what point do you cross that line between feeling, that you're spending too much time just chilling out and enjoying the moment, and the time that you actually need to dedicate to your business. So retaking that 4-hour work week kind of idea, but digging deeper, because I think that Tim Ferriss kind of just left it there. He started doing the 4-hour body and all these things, but I've really developed systems that you can manage huge products, huge companies, and huge undertakings in very little time. It just kind of organizes you and focuses you on what really matters. And that makes you extremely productive, and that makes you really happy. So I like productivity, like really teaching people ways to shorten the distance between their ideas, their plans, and what actually happens in their life.
Absolutely, that's awesome. So, if you would be so kind,
Yeah.
could we maybe hear one or two of the titles that you're thinking about? You're thinking about publishing, or is it top secret
No,
right now?
no, zero. No, I don't have any secrets. So the first one is very, very simple, because I love this movie, the Something About Mary, right? And there's this scene in Something About Mary where the hitchhiker is telling Ben Stiller about his great idea, and it's like 6-minute apps, and it's just a minute shorter than the 7-minute apps, which was the existing product, right? And Ben Stiller just kind of goes like, wow, what if somebody comes up with 5-minute apps? And then the guy gets all crazy. But I just found that it was very funny how you can start playing with these positioning statements and just play with other people's names to position your own product or name or brand. So I thought about the 4-hour work week, and I said, like, what would happen if I publish a book that's just called the 2-hour work week? I'm just gonna make it less. I'm just gonna bring the number down. So that's one idea. And the other idea is, I like the notion of self-management. The idea that people can manage their own feelings and resources and thoughts, and just that process of really managing yourself. And there's this concept, or this name that's I call it CEO. So it's CEO, like the title, and then you just put a little M at the end, and it gives it the Om, the mantra. And it's all about, it could be subtitles such as a practical guide to managing yourself and others more effectively. Like really a step-by-step guide to acquiring better habits, following through with your projects, just self-management. So those are two ideas.
That's awesome. That's really cool. And thanks for sharing those. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, sure.
So we talked a little bit about. Actually, we talked a lot about your past. We talked a little bit about what you're doing now, but long term, right? Like either 20 years out or 10 years out, whatever it may be. What do you want to be doing? Where do you see yourself going? Where do you see life taking you? Years to come.
Yeah, I mean, the way I try to do it is that the most forward-looking I try and really concentrate on is 5 years, because more than that, I kind of feel it gets very fuzzy for me. Like, I don't really know. Like, there's too much uncertainty and chaos more than 5 years away from now. So I kind of try and look 5 years as the max that I kind of know more or less what I kind of want to be doing. And so that would be my long-term view. It's kind of like what I'm trying to say. So long-term, or 5 years from now, and maybe going forward, we'll just have to see how I'm kind of feeling at that point, is just, to really minimize my life's complexity and just really deconstruct the whole thing and put it back together through entrepreneurship and good habits, and just the whole self-management idea, and just managing your time, and looking at other ways to structure your day, etc. To get to a point where, when you're 40, in 5 years I'll be 40, so I'm 35 now. So when I'm 40, I really want to be in a place where I can enjoy most of my time. Like, I really do not want to be busy. I'm not one of those people that needs to be constantly busy to be emotionally engaged with life. I like to just sit and watch, and especially if I'm like in a very pristine environment, especially a tropical beach. So a tropical beach in the middle of the jungle is kind of my happy place. That's kind of what always has been my happy place. And Colombia is like that, or Costa Rica. So my vision is really to find a way to buy a piece of land in a beautiful beach, put internet, and just figure out a way to build an habitat that works with nature, etc., and that I can, connect to the internet and be helpful to other people and publish my thoughts, but not overcomplicate my life. Like I've seen what complication brings, and it's just absurd. Like it's not going to get you to where you want to be, to where you want to be. So I feel that I'm starting to develop the, let's call it the hedonist archetype a bit. Like I just want to be chill and just, enjoy the minutes that go by.
That's awesome. That's awesome, man. And I really do think that what you said about deconstructing the complexity, deconstructing life is so important, right? Because we do only have a certain amount of time, and that's time that could be spent with family. That's time that could be spent relaxing on the beach or in the middle of the woods, doing the things that you really want to do. So I really do think that that's profound what you said, and I agree 100%. So I just have a few more questions for you. I really do appreciate your time.
Yeah, for sure.
But you've done some incredible things, and I have absolutely no doubt that you'll continue to do incredible things, and I wish you the best of luck in all your ventures moving forward. But what drives you? What at the end of the day, whether you call it your why, whether you call it purpose, whether you call it whatever you call it, what's that big driving factor that it gets you out of bed every morning and it gives you and empowers you to do the things that you do?
Yeah, I think it's just the constant battle with myself. Like I spend a lot of time with myself, like hours and hours every day. So I'm very in tune with the things that I'm doing wrong, bad habits, or when I overreact or become overly emotional, or just all these things that we just exhibit every day because of our genetic and neurological makeup. So I think that what motivates me to do things and just follow my intuition, so to speak, is that I'm trying to really, be responsible for my own actions and really take that responsibility and deal with the things that I'm doing wrong and try to improve them. But I really feel it's like a contest against myself. I'm not really motivated by ranks. Like I don't even had a Twitter until like a month ago, and I was going to all these conferences, and the people, you don't have Twitter. I'm like, I don't need Twitter. I mean, I don't need followers to really feel fulfilled, right? So it's just a thing with myself. Like I really feel that if I structure my day and my life in a way that I'm giving myself the time that I need to, do yoga or eat well or think or write or just really do the things that I want to do, I know that's what's going to make me happy. That I'm going to be satisfied that I was disciplined enough to do it, because it's difficult. Sometimes you don't want to do it and you just want to watch TV or yeah. So that's what motivates me.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you're talking about how you wanna you wanna always be developing and it's a contest against yourself, right? So I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs especially struggle with that discipline and struggle to really get a grasp of their own life. Well, if you could give a little bit of advice, if you've been doing it for so long, what advice can you give to other people who may be struggling with that themselves?
Yeah, I think a couple things. But the first thing, what I always start with, and I think it's the bedrock of any well-constructed life, is your habits. And it's the same with a company, your habits. I call them habits, people call them processes, but it's like your recurring activities. And that's where I would start. Like if you feel that your life is kind of all upside down and nothing's really going your way and you're running out of money and you're trying to do this and you're dealing with just a bunch of things, I would start looking at your habits. And a hack that I use is that I try and acquire one habit at a time. So for example, I might say this week, I'm trying to acquire X habit. And I even have an app that kind of does it for you, but you kind of commit to acquiring that habit and you do it. And after that, it kind of becomes second nature, so to speak. And at that point, you try and acquire a second one. And when it becomes second nature, you go for a third one. So it's kind of like habit stacking. And after doing it for a while and you have, 10 or 11 or 12 good habits, your life kind of starts getting back into shape. And at that point, you start looking forward. You can actually, not only be reactive, and you start thinking about your project. So that's when you actually start sitting down, looking at your, short-term life goals, for example, this year, and figure out projects that are gonna get you closer to where you want to be. So you're not actively proactively, you're acting proactively, right? So that's habits. That's habits projects. That's kind of a framework that I use. So I actually keep a sort of diary where I know like what habits I'm trying to keep active and what projects I'm working actively on. And that's kind of the way I feel that I can keep my life in balance being an entrepreneur, where you don't have to have a schedule. You could be working from home, and you don't really have that constant motivation.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, doing all the different things that you've done and accomplishing all the different things that you've accomplished, who do you see yourself as, right? And I like to ask this question because as entrepreneurs, we have to wear, thousands of hats all the time. But how would you describe yourself?
But as far as in my professional life in entrepreneurship, like of all the hats that you would have to wear, which one do I feel the most comfortable wearing?
Yeah, yeah. That's an interesting way to approach the question, but yeah.
Yeah, I feel that I enjoy the leader hat, and I think that a natural born leader in any company today, be it your own or somebody else's, is the marketer, because he is the intersection between employees, management, so to speak, and customers. Marketing is getting more and more to be that human element uh, that kind of develops the brand and the value proposition and makes everybody align with it and resonate with it. And I just feel that it's very interesting how marketing is moving away from being like this thing that nobody wanted to do, or it was just a waste of money or something that got in sales' way, to being the fundamental activity that makes it all work and be worthwhile. So I feel that it's very interesting what the internet and just a more informed consumer has done as far as marketing. So I have the marketing hat would be my answer.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's incredible. So, again, I really do appreciate your time. This has been an awesome interview. It's been, I've had a ton of fun. Hopefully, you've enjoyed yourself
Yeah,
as
yeah,
well.
it's been very, very cool.
Um, I have two more questions for you.
Okay.
The first one is, what do you want to leave behind as your legacy?
Um, I think knowledge like books would not be something that I'd be particularly against leaving. Like I think school or other forms of knowledge that might evolve. But yeah, like encapsulated knowledge, even if it's a blog, anything really, but something that kind of can trace your train of thought and share your ideas through time with other people and hopefully help them accomplish something. So yeah, I think that would be my answer.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the last question that I have for you is there anything about yourself that you think is an important part of who you are that I did not ask you about today? In other words, what did I miss?
What do you miss? I think that I think it's what everybody misses sometimes when you interview people that are by definition being interviewed, so in a position to answer questions, etc. But it's just how hard the whole thing is. You know, how insecure you feel, how every decision is something that just takes effort. So, for example, I've had two experiences where you kind of have these feelings that resembles what you feel being an entrepreneur that you have to deal with and push through. And the most recent was traffic and conversion. You know, the presentation. So when you're doing these presentations and preparing for them, and just planning your thoughts and the slides, etc., you know, you feel very insecure because you feel that your ideas are not interesting because you've lived with them for the past, you know, month. So that's the feeling that you get. And then when you do them and people approach you and they're like, wow, those are so cool. Like, I really appreciate your ideas. It's just mind boggling. It just really feels mind boggling. And I think it's the same with musicians. Like, they put this song out and they're like, it's just bullshit. And then people are like, wow. So as entrepreneurs, we have to fight that urge to be overly critical of our ideas and just be very in tune with that bias that you have lived with them for a long while. So they seem more mundane to you. To somebody else, it might seem, you know, it might be an epiphany. So that's something interesting.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, I do again want to thank you so much for coming on this interview. It really means a lot. I think we've provided a ton of value to the community of listeners, and I really do appreciate your time. And to everybody listening, I want to thank you. Every interview, time after time, we do this for you to help provide value to you, to help to make a difference in your life. And you guys are and gals are the reason we do it, and I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening and whatnot. So, this has been another Project Egg interview. Today we've been talking to Carlos Angel from Colombia. Thanks a lot.